There is a fertile plain also on this side. Fertile, but not thickly populated. Only the local farmers live there. Says Peter. What shall we do for bread? I'm hungry, and there are no Philistine ears of corn here. Grass and leaves, leaves and flowers. I'm neither a little sheep nor a bee, grumbles Peter to his companions, who smile at his remark. Judas Thaddeus turns round. He was a little ahead, and he says, "We'll buy some bread in the next village." Providing they don't make us flee, concludes James of Zebedee. Jesus replies, "You who say that we have to watch everything, be careful lest you pick up the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. I think that is what you are doing, without considering the wrong you are doing. Be careful, very careful," says Jesus. The apostles look at one another and whisper, "What is he saying?" The bread was given to us by the woman of the deaf-mute and by the innkeeper at Kadesh. I still have it here. It is the only bread we have. And we do not know whether we will be able to find any more to satisfy our hunger. So why does he say that we buy bread of Sadducees and Pharisees with their yeast? Perhaps he does not want us to buy any in the villages here. Jesus, who once again was ahead of them all alone, turns round. Why are you afraid to be left without bread? Even if all the people here were Sadducees and Pharisees, you would not be without bread, because I told you not to buy any. I'm not speaking of the yeast which is in bread. So you can buy bread anywhere you like to satisfy your hunger. And if nobody would sell you any, you would not be left without bread just the same. Do you not remember the 5 loaves with which 5,000 people appeased their hunger? Do you not remember that you collected 12 baskets full of the scraps remaining? I could do for you, who are 12 and have 1 loaf, what I did for 5,000 people with 5 loaves. Do you not understand to which yeast I'm referring? To the yeast that rises in the hearts of Pharisees, Sadducees, and doctors against me. It is hatred. It is heresy. You are now going towards hatred, as if part of the Pharisaical yeast had entered your hearts. Not even your enemy is to be hated. Not even a very small inlet is to be opened to anything that is not God. After the first element, others opposed to God would enter. Sometimes one perishes or is defeated because one wants to fight enemies with equal weapons. And once you've been defeated, you could by contact absorb their doctrine. Be charitable and reserved. You are not yet in a position to oppose such doctrines without being infected, because you have some of their elements as well. And hatred is one of them. I would also warn you that they may change method in order to entice you and take you away from me by being extremely polite, showing that they are repentant and anxious to make peace. You must avoid them. But when they try to imbue you with their doctrines, you must reject them. That is the yeast to which I was referring. Animosity, which is against love, and false doctrines. I say to you, Be prudent. A pause there. We have briefly Jesus mentioning the yeast of the Pharisees in the Gospels. And we have here an extended discussion of what he means. And it's very useful for us because he says, don't hate even your enemy. Now we know that Jesus says this is in the Gospels. That's what the Catholic faith teaches. But it's useful to have him to speak a bit more about that, because that begins an opening and other elements can enter. Don't even allow a small inlet to anything that is not God. So if we know it can be anything, it can be watching extremely violent films, for example. It could be holding particular political positions. Could be attitude to another human being, like a neighbour who's irritated us. These are the inlets. And through them, Satan, as Jesus tells us, can enter and expand his influence. And also here, as well as a lesson for us, we got an indication of Jesus' wisdom as he's schooling these apostles. And he's letting them know how the apostles can be nasty, but they can be good cop and bad cop. And they can turn to politeness to entice them. This is the downfall of Judas Iscariot, by the way. He was given the impression by the members of the Sanhedrin, relevant members, powerful members, and the priestly class, that he was going to be favoured. They thought he was a big man. He could actually help save Israel from the recklessness of Jesus, and they only wanted to help Jesus. All this comes out, and Judas falls for it. Well, he's seduced by this, and then he comes back to Jesus. He accepts the benign words of our Lord to guide him periodically, but he falls back, and then he comes back to Jesus, he falls back. This goes on for 3.5 years of our Lord's ministry until finally Judas gives in to the influence of the devil, effectively. And the betrayal occurs, which we read about briefly in the New Testament. But the politeness that Jesus is referring to, for them to be on guard against, is probably more serious, more of a risk than the outright hostility that the apostles will face.